Hi and welcome to Earthlytales. And our guest for today's podcast is Prabal Basu Roy, sir, who is a Solon Fellow from London Business School and a chartered accountant with over 4 decades of experience in corporate leadership and financial markets. He has served director and group CFO in major multinational companies like GEC, Xerox, British Telecom, and Polaris. He later founded a proprietary equity hedge fund. Today, he advises boards, institutional investors, startup senior leaders across on strategy, governance, and financial markets. A widely respected independent voice, his insights frequently appear on leading publications like Mint, Economic Times, as well as on national business news.
We have seen that the technology has been fast moving and everything is changing around the digitalization. And just when we understood that we are understanding digitalization transformation, AI entered the conversation. So
Yes.
with AI being around suddenly around across industries from finance to design, everyone is now thinking around how the work can be done. So there are young professionals who feel anxious as well and who are excited about this. So to ask you a question that AI is creating a turbulence around across the industries. So what does this disruption mean for the young professionals and how they can prepare themselves to be relevant in this particular field?
So, Sujatha, this is a very existential and crucial question, actually. And uh, I need to give you a bit of a context to you and your viewers to be able to appreciate this, because there's just too much uncertainty and fear today, essentially, because of fear of the unknown, really. So let me put the context in place. There are two points I'd like to make for the context. The first is that, you know, few periods really stand out for being transformative on a civilizational scale. Uh, you take the agricultural revolution of 10,000 BC, or the scientific revolution in 16th century, the industrial revolution, 18th century, the internet revolution and the digital revolution, 2000s, all of that. So this thing which we are witnessing now is on that scale. So that
Okay.
is the first thing which needs to be understood. And in any revolutionary major technology change of the nature we have seen or we are seeing now, the problem is not what the outcome will be. The outcome has generally been always good for the society as a whole, as we have seen from all the examples I gave you. But we essentially, what we are doing in this phase is that it changes the way we live, produce, govern, think, so on and so forth. So it changes actually, even organize ourselves, it changes actually everything. So this period when we are doing all of that is actually very turbulent, and how we manage that turbulence is the key. And this applies at the individual level as well as the individual level of the government and governance, society, all of that. So, in the Industrial Revolution, for example, in the 17th century to the early 18th century, societies did not know how to industrialize. So those who could do that first reaped the benefits for almost 100 years, like the United Kingdom, actually. And US came much later, but United Kingdom in particular. We are seeing a similar thing happen in AI today. So China and the United States, I mean, they are the ones who are ruling the sweepstakes today, as far as, creating this AI society, so to speak. So they will get all the benefits, and we better get used to that fact that is exactly what will happen, and we'll be at the receiving end. We meaning the rest of the world will be the receiving end. Now, how we democratize AI to benefit all, that is the question to be asked. And I don't think governments are asking that question in that area yet. Everybody is not just trying to grapple where we are. So we have to be prepared for some degree of exploitation. But there's a way to manage that, and I'll come to that in a minute. The second thing about perspective, which is necessary to be, to be understood, is that the cycle for any disruptive changes, right, is essentially, again, standard. Initially, there are some expectations. Then suddenly there comes a hype. Then there is severe disappointment. And finally, only some survive when there is a stability. And the easiest thing which most of us can associate with in our lifetimes has been the internet revolution. How many of the internet companies of 95 to 2000 exist today? Very few. But there was a hype, there was, all sorts of money going into it and people, all sorts of things, right? But finally a stability. So simply, this is the cycle which AI is also taking at the moment. Now, because of this huge uncertainty around AI or against any new technology for that matter, we simply do not know how many jobs will go, because that depends on a couple of factors. One, on the rate of adoption. The rate of adoption depends on the employees, right? Because they are the ones who will have to do this transition. And the way Amazon and Microsoft and the rest of them are sacking people by the thousands. A big risk in the adoption factor is that many, many employees will not cooperate. We saw that during the computerization phase as well, in the early phase, right? So it takes that, it gets extended. So this is one factor to be kept in mind. The second one is the massive investment in data centers. So just to give you a data point, which I just picked up. So in 2023, it was $150 billion invested by the big five. There's Amazon and Microsofts of the world, these big five. They're listed companies, so you have that data available with you. In 2026, that $150 billion is going to become $700 billion a year. So now, with this sort of money coming in, will this payoff work? I mean, that's a question which the financiers of this revolution will have to think about. So will the payoff work? Will it scale enough for the payoff to work, right? Will it scale? We don't know. Like I said, adoption, we don't know. And who will keep on funding this indefinitely? Will this money keep on coming? So basically, we don't know. We really don't know. Anyone who says and gives a crystal ball, frankly, is only talking about a larger format. We really don't know. So Mr. Scott McNealy, the founder of Sun Microsystems, had told me once when I was in London Business School, year 2000. He had told me that, planning to the nth degree of freedom is no longer going to be a sustainable advantage. This was when internet was just coming in along with telecom. And he said, people of your generation will have to find ways to adapt. Adaptability is the skill which will drive. None of us know what's going to happen in the future. This was year 99, 2000. Too much, the change is very rapid, and AI that changes even faster than that. So the skill which we need to build ourselves consciously is the skill to adapt. So organizations have to adapt, for example, right? And that takes time. So organization, layouts, workflows, management practices, data, people reskilling. I mean, when steam power went to electricity, it took 30 years in the 1900s for people to actually adapt. When PCs came in our lifetime, in 1983, 82, 83, it took 15 years before finally, email became something which people could work on and see Excels and all of that. So I would say there are exciting times for the young people who have skills. World is in a very transformative phase. The rate of change is huge. So is the turbulence. And unfortunately this time, or fortunately or unfortunately, this turbulence is across domains. It is in technology, of course. It is in the economy. It is in geopolitics, as you're seeing, geopolitics. It's in climate change. So this period is spectacularly more, let's say, more exciting and risky, depending on which part of the matrix you are. And what are the skills you need for that? It is not the hard
But
skills,
the
mind you.
opportunities
The
which young
hard
people have
skills,
to think
engineer,
about today,
chartered
and this is
accountant,
the thing
doctor,
about
etc., will
adaptability,
always be
etc.,
there.
is if the
That is a
mindset,
given.
if the
But
mindset
the
is
softer
entrepreneurial,
skills are something
that
which,
is
especially
essentially
in our
based on
society, we
growth
do not
on one hand
inculcate.
and continuous learning on
Consciously.
the other.
And they are the
If this
ones
is
who
the
will help you
mindset
survive,
one
and
can
AI will not be able to take that away.
approach life with
So
in
there are things
general,
like, for example, attitude.
and
Most important
continuously
attitude.
reinvent yourself,
Humility,
as
curiosity,
stability of
risk-taking,
careers will
that
not
sort
be
of thing.
there. So, if you continuously
Second,
reinvent
letting go
yourself.
of one's current identity. So I was doing X, now job is gone, so I'm finished. No, you let go of that identity, move to the next one. Adaptability, obviously, is the center stage of that. Look out for challenges, ferret them out. And which challenges will come? Leadership, because I can guarantee you, if you have the courage to step up and do things, right? People will follow, because everybody is looking for a leader, essentially. Frankly, nobody knows. Everybody's looking for a leader. So if you can step up and do that, so these opportunities need to be grabbed. So whenever you see an opportunity, grab it. Don't say, I'm in a comfort zone and therefore things are okay. Obviously, that's the default, but you have to move out of that. Another skill is ability to tell stories and articulate your point of view and get people excited. So you have financiers, you have customers, you have other type of people who you can get together by your storytelling and do a startup or do your idea, whatever the idea is. Creativity and problem solving, very, very important. AI will not take that away. In any job, the job is not important. How to be resourceful enough to do more with less. So it also links back to creativity and links back to problem solving and all of that. Tenacity, never give up. Age old. Those of us in the army background know this. So AI will never be able to replace these skills. And I say this from personal example and lived experience, Sujatha. I've had a similar twist throughout my career on adaptability and, doing different things. Of course, we didn't have these sort of existential pressures at any point in time, apart from the internet. But probably in army background, they're helped, which throws you in diverse circumstances every 2 years, and you learn to accomplish that task. You have to find a solution. That's what the uniform services are meant for. And of course, personally for me, I would say, I also had the opportunity to work with two great entrepreneurs very closely, directly with them, that is. One was Mr. Azim Premji, early on in my career, when I was the CFO and board member of Wipro, and then with Arun Jain, the founder of Polaris and Intellect. So they both demonstrated various of these skills which entrepreneurs have now, which every one of us will have to inculcate. So there is no employee versus this. That is the mindset I would leave. I would sort of leave you with in terms of skill sets for this coming uncertainty.
So, sir, you have, while giving your examples of mentioning the skill set, one main thing you mentioned throughout your journey is leadership and how leadership plays an important role in everyone's career. So we have a lot of videos on the social media around leadership, around hustle, everything around the social media. But when it comes to reality and the corporate, it is totally different. In the real world, it is less of visibility and more of responsibility. What kind of transformational leadership is required? How can one, try to be more trustworthy, create competence, and not use vulnerabilities as a mode for their leadership game?
Yeah. So, Sujatha, you see, it's true. The society is in such a place that these questions are relevant. See, we are not, to my mind at least, we are not losing the possibility of transformational leadership. But the environment in which we are operating makes it harder to practice it. I think that is the key distinction, I would say. So, and that is because the attention spans are shorter, incentives are skewed towards, more visibility than to depth. And people often equate momentum with meaning. You keep on moving around and all of that. plus the moral and ethical fabric, is being strained on a daily basis in India as well as the rest of the world, in various parts of the world, right? On top of that, we have the return of authoritarianism all over again. So precisely this is the environment which we are operating in. And it has all happened very suddenly, in the last few couple of decades, maybe, or, probably even shorter than that. So precisely because the environment is so noisy, those who lead with substance, to my mind, will stand out faster. But the journey will be a little tough because you will not be a cheerleader. You will be seen to be different. And it also depends on who recognizes you for that talent and who actually puts you down. So, like I said, the environment is what is the problem. But of course, people will always look for people with substance. So here are some simplest ways, again, from lived experience, which I can say, where a young professional can build real trust in today's world, and therefore add substance. I think substance is the main thing along with trust. So the first would be, for example, which is age old but not practiced, is that keep your word every time. Reliability compiles much faster than charisma, especially if you're in short cycle digital environments, definitely more so. Your reliability is important. And it's simple things like keeping time, keeping commitments, keeping the discipline of work-related outputs, and so on and so forth. Second is you must be having the ability to articulate and communicate clearly and calmly. So people trust those who actually reduce the noise rather than increase. And with Twitter, you have seen, with Twitter, Facebook, and all of that, you've seen, how much noise is there in the system, right? So people trust those who actually reduce the noise, find solutions, and not add to the noise. Third would be, I would say, you show your work, you demonstrate your work first. Briefly explain your decisions, where everything is based on a certain decision and payoff matrix. So you explain your decisions, why you came to this payoff matrix between the choices made. Decision may be right or wrong, only hindsight will say, nobody knows. But at least, there's a logical framework why you have done it, and it's not arbitrary, right?
Yeah.
Invest, I would say, the fourth would be invest, I would say, in few long-term relationships with depth. And depth with a handful of people really outperforms the shallow reach of hundreds of followers. Now, I have more than 500,000 followers on LinkedIn, for example. It just came from nowhere. I don't know. I don't do any of these, promotions and this, that, and the other, and, all that. I just write. No, but with more than 500,000, there would be a very few who actually add value, at least to me. And they're in touch with me. And, I value that, for example. So that's what I meant. Invest in few relationships. Even when you're going through life, you will see that if you're in a tough spot, there are very few friends who will actually stand up for you. Very few. You'll see other hangers on always there when you sort of do well in life and all of that. So I think that's another very key skill of building substance. The other is, I would say, which is something I do personally, in this phase of life, even more so, but I've always done it, is always try and build people. Extend a helping hand to those who need it and, who can give you nothing in return. So this builds a very high index of trust around you, generally amongst people, and you feel good yourself. So what I'm saying is essentially move away from the Western dominated culture, which we have all imbibed now, unfortunately, which is the quid pro culture or the whiffum culture. Whiffum is what's in it for me. Of course, you have to take care of your interests. That is fine. But, move away from that quid pro culture. If I can't help him, why is he of use to me, for example? I never do that. Otherwise, you'll never build people. No one will build, you'll be able to build. The other part is, again, part of credibility, which is your online presence, those of us who have an online presence, and your personal presence, your offline presence must be in sync. You can't say one thing here and do something else. And there are enough examples of that, which we see all around, right? So be consistent. When your behavior matches, people will stop questioning your motives effectively. And do less of advertising yourself, even though this is an advertising-led age, but let others discover the impact. But the critical one, Sujatha, the last one, which I would like to say is take accountability for your decisions. This will set you apart. The single most important factor today, and I'm planning to write an article on this actually in one of the mainline newspapers. The single most important factor for driving mistrust in society today, where from politicians to corporate leaders, everybody promises the moon, but deliver very little. The single most factor there is that there is no accountability for their actions. They can get away by saying A, B, C, D, E and do something completely different. And we are seeing this right across. It is not located to one geography or another. And this has gone down the line and is so prevalent today because the leaders are doing it, is that you simply have stopped trusting people. You just stop trusting people. So very few people you can rely on, right?
Mhm.
Now, if you compare different parts of the world, and this is interesting because I travel a lot, as I may have told you earlier. You see, if you compare different parts of the world with Northern Europe, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, I call that a heaven on earth. And I traveled very frequently there over the last many years. I call it a heaven on earth for this reason, where the core ethic of that, which binds their society, these 4 countries, small countries, highly prosperous, highly happy, is that it binds them as trust. If someone tells you, from the shopkeeper to the bus driver to anybody, you know it'll happen. I'm not saying there are no frauds there. That's not the point. There are maybe few here and there, but this is what binds them. And this is the only idyllic place in the world. And I feel so much about it. I mean, in fact, when my younger daughter had to go abroad for doing technology, core technology, US was the easiest choice for me. All our friends and my uncles and everybody, we know everyone in the US. It's so easy to send. And the education is good also. But I did not send her to the West. I explained to her, I think you should go to Northern Europe, to Sweden in particular, because it had the highest technology after Silicon Valley in terms of clusters and all of that in core tech. And it's been almost a decade after that. And they're so happy. So this is the real problem, I think, today in today's world. So transformation leadership isn't about making grand gestures. It's about being one of the rare people can genuinely rely on. And this scarcity itself will create a reputation for you in the current society we built. And so I would say being trustworthy and being reliable are key to successes, in my view. Yeah.
Coming down, we have moved down to the AI question. We have moved on to the leadership. Now coming on to a little bit of the market side. So one
Yeah.
question that I want to ask you is, we've seen that there are all sort of people around, and especially during the bull run, everyone becomes an expert and they enjoy the ride that is going up, and
Yes.
everyone is making money and they're all
Yes.
happy that, yeah, even I am an expert.
Yeah.
So suddenly, then when the bear market hits, that is when they realize probably that was a luck and that's not a skill. So how would you differentiate, or how would you ask people to differentiate even for themselves as a reality check that skill and luck are 2 different things?
Absolutely, 100%. And in fact, all that environment we talked about in the earlier 2 actually dovetail into financial markets. And since I am in financial markets
Yeah.
as well, it just shows me, like, this is the environment which is noisy. You can't trust anyone. It's all run of sharks. You have to distinguish, and swim through that and yet make money, for yourself. And so essentially, to answer your question, which will help. So I will answer this in reverse, Sujatha. to help differentiate between genuine competence and simply being there when the tide is on the rise. Yeah. So I will tell you about what not to do in financial markets. And that will answer this question for you. But just before that, I need to explain one particular thing about economic history, which was one of the courses I took in London Business School during the Sloan Fellowship many years ago. So the professor had actually explained this to us in a lot of detail. The summary is like this. You have to understand, by the way, this is based on economic history, right? So I'll get into that. So you have to understand, before you do anything in the markets, you have to understand the cycle dynamics you're in. The US has controlled the world monetary system ever since Bretton Woods in 1944, right? Then it went haywire, and in 1971, it's called the Nixon shock. They delinked the gold standard. They basically went off the gold standard. It was on 15th August, paradoxically, 15th August, 1971, US went off the gold standard, okay? So essentially, it essentially meant that it could now come into a regime of what is called fiat currency, which is you can continue to print US dollars without any backing in return, right? Earlier, it's to back by something like, it was like gold. Now you can just keep on printing, printing money to fund its financial needs and financial profligacy in the case of the US, right? And basically living beyond your means. So, if I don't have a budget to control me, I can keep on printing, right? So this is what this was the biggest change, which is resulting all of what we are doing today. And the petrodollar arrangement, which Henry Kissinger signed with Saudi Arabia in 72, created an unending need and demand across the world for the US dollar. So on one hand, they could print as much as they wanted. On the other hand, there was always a demand for US dollars because of the petrodollar arrangement. The whole world needed oil and it had to be priced in dollars, right? So when money is unlimited and there is no devaluation risk, right? The asset bubbles are bound to be created. So this is the core of the issue from 71 onwards. You have US, which is the world's largest economy, controls the world monetary order. Money is unlimited because it prints, and there is no devaluation risk because of petrodollars. So asset bubbles are bound to be created. Now, these asset bubbles, just reflect back. In the 70s was in the industrials in the United States. Companies like IBM, companies like Xerox, Polaroid, and the rest of them. That burst after a few years, and it came into hard assets like gold and oil.
Yeah.
That burst, and then it went into the then emerging markets like Taiwan and Japan. Then Japan burst in the late 80s. And then came the first tech boom of the 90s, which burst in 2000. Then the money moved to BRICS and real estate till 2008 happened. Then technology again came in 2015, and now we are in AI. So you have to, if you have to contextualize where the big money is moving. These bubbles will always be there because of this fundamental thing. They just move from asset class to not asset class. They move from asset to asset. One particular genre to another particular genre. So this is very, very important to know. So just follow the money and the macro trend before anything else. This is what I would always say. Currently, we're seeing this in AI, or this particular boom.
Yeah.
The rest is all stories created within that trend, which uplift stocks of that genre. It's all stories and fables, mind you. And I have learned investment banking with, as part of this program, and I have many investment banker friends internationally. This is a fact. We are just storytellers, You have to get this right. Yes.
Yeah. It creates a perspective for us also that we had to see all these areas as well, before even taking a decision and be cautious of what you're doing.
Exactly. So if you know this framework is very important to understand. If you understand this, then hubris will come. You'll have your neighbor next door, your friend will say, oh yeah, I bought this at this and I'm sold it at this, and he becomes an expert and he keeps on telling you that he's an expert because he knows he's not an expert, but he'll keep on telling you, I'm an expert, The hubris comes with the boat being lifted by the tide, mistaken for intelligence. This is bound to happen. But cut out that noise. Unless you cut out that noise from your friends, from your neighbor, from your, whoever, from the media, So therefore, I would say the things we should never do in the stock markets is never listen to experts on YouTube, on TV, some TV anchors, who play the role of cheerleaders essentially, and some actually also position themselves as experts, give daily calls, every few minute calls. And so, just never, ever listen to them. Never, ever listen to them. And that's, I feel, is a great risk today because many new people are coming into the markets and they listen to this channel or the other. And, and I see how they are being misled on a daily basis. Remember, the oldest con in town. Yeah, this is the other thing. The oldest con in town is to what is called distribute shares to the retail investor after the big players have accumulated and decided to offload. And this is happening today. Earlier, it just happened on telex, then on fax machines, and now it's happening on the digital media, television, and so on. So this is number one. Number two is, believe me, nobody knows the next big idea which will make billions. Nobody knows. The broad direction is easy to say. Like it's easy to say AI will do well. Of course, AI will do well, by all means. Or, tech will do well, or whatever. But the difficult questions, you just scratch the surface of it, are never answered by these so-called experts on fund managers or television guys or whoever. Questions like, yeah, of course AI will do well, but can you tell me when will it succeed? Or can you tell me, will it scale? And if it scales, will it be profitable? Or if it is profitable, will it generate returns even if it turns profitable? Generate at this price at which you are getting in today? Will it generate returns? So it will be profitable, yes. So all this is pie in the sky, right? It's pie in the sky. From times immemorial, tulip mania in the 1600s, the South Sea bubble in the 1700s, the dot-coms in the 2000s. This is all to trap gullible retail investors and HNI investors. So you have to be careful about this factor. So never go too much with the trend. It's a very dangerous thing. Have you seen, for example, anyone revisit their expert calls when they go wrong? Anyone? I don't want to give names because they're all, you see them on TV every day and fund managers, but research reports of the past, just read them. Any research report from any of the guys and the old clippings from TV or newspapers, and they'll be very instructive in this regard. So that's why I say never follow anybody. The other thing is structural themes. I must tell you a little bit about this. Capital markets regularly create structural themes. So a few years ago, for example, which attract massive flows, by the way. So a few years ago, they created something called the ESG funds. In 2020, as few years as 2020, ESG, everybody and his uncle was talking of ESG funds. Does any of them hear of them today? Even anyone? So they attract themes. Mutual funds will create big themes. That's the time to actually exit, because they'll create this, take the money, and then it underperforms badly.
Yeah.
Right? So dot-coms happened in 2000, the brick super cycle in 2004, the clean tech happened in 2006 to 12, solar startups, fuels, energy, the 3D printing happened in 2014. I can go on and on. I mean, I just don't do it because there's no point telling people who don't want to listen. So stocks went up 10x, et cetera, then that cycle happened. Most of them disappeared. Some remained. And then again, it'll come back. So, there are time for everything. Do it. The next point is award ceremonies. Avoid them like a plague as far as your investment decisions are concerned. Kingfisher, Jet Airways, Camson Bio, Satyam, Sahara, Rana Kapoor, Yes Bank, Malvinder Singh of Fortis, all have been awarded. And everybody claps up by these mean nothing. Nothing for it. Remember, it's your money. So I avoid them like a plague. So the basic premise, Sujatha, is that nobody knows. The fact is nobody knows. Don't follow anybody. Use common sense. Understand the market cycle you're in and keep risk management as your top priority. Top priority. And if I were to leave your audience with two things to do, just two things to do after not doing all these things for your financial well-being. And I've paid a very, very heavy price for this as I've learned this. I've also learned this along, there was no one to tell you. I've also learned, I've been in the market since I was doing my chartered accountants. As a young boy of 19, I started. So I've learned a lot of things. So two things which I would say at the end of my so many years for your financial well-being. There are two things you should do. One is buy passive funds, passive index funds. For India, for example, buy the Nifty ETF, for example. They are the best for retail investors because the main advantage of these index funds is research has shown that very, very few funds, other funds, have been able to outperform index funds on a long-term basis. Very few, despite all the noise. And there is no noise in this. And there is no noise in this at all, right? You don't need to analyze different stocks, different portfolios, this, that, and the other. And many academicians, from Warren Buffett to George Bogle to Jack Brennan, Paul Samuelson, they have been strong proponents of index. In fact, Vanguard, which John Bogle started with $11 million in 1975 when he got fired from one of the big companies. He said, I'll do my own thing because they're all fooling you anyway. So he started Vanguard with $11 million in 1975. Today, Vanguard has funds of 12 trillion US dollars. 12 trillion is the largest index fund in the world.
Yeah.
So this is the first thing you should do. The second thing you should do is disciplined asset allocation between stocks, commodities, currencies, etc., and real estate, and across different markets. Luckily now in India, we can do that. Earlier, we could not do that. So India, maybe US, maybe some other countries, whatever. Find a fund manager who does this effectively for you, or you can do it yourself as well. But find a manager who can do this. If you do these two things over the next 30 years, for the younger people I'm talking about, the next 30 years, you may not get a daily kick, the daily kick of cocaine, of financial cocaine into your blood, which is what all these guys are selling on television. They will not do that. You will not get that, but you will essentially benefit from the compounding in finance, which is the single largest thing which gives you sustained returns. The rest is all, believe me, is storytelling and fables, which is sold in the public domain. That's all there is. So don't confuse intelligence with the bull market, or in these times, you can call it liquidity. Similarly, unless humility is your prime character trait, early successes can very, very often be attributed solely to competence and not the circumstances. This is the real story. And this formed the basis of hubris, which we talked about when you started it. So sure recipe for disaster at some point. Yeah.
There are so many variables that are affecting the market, and there are so many things that are going on. What do you feel? How should one react to the news in today's time? And if people who are new to investing, what should they do? Should they go and invest? Should they listen, or should they hold on to cash?
No. So as I mentioned to you earlier, never ever take advice of whoever is willing to give you advice, because if he is so good, he will not give you advice. He will he will do so just forget. I mentioned this earlier, all the things you should not be doing. And as to the question of whether we should invest still in the market or not, that's a very big discussion. My view, I can say that I sold most of my investments about a year and a half ago, and I've been liquid since then. And the Nifty has gone nowhere. Nifty has stayed where it is, right, since then.
Yes.
So when I actually did that, my friends, which are some very close friends, are there who are, who manage large funds, who are high net worth, and all of very educated, like us. We have a group and all of that. And people said, he needs to get his head examined. But I said, no, but I've said this in the public domain.
Yeah.
And why I'm not as hunky-dory about it as others. Of course, I'm not going to sell my core investments like Larsen Toubro, for example, or something like that. Those are core investments. I'm not yet selling them. That's not the point. But I would be out of the market and stay liquid on cash and do opportunistic trading every time. That is okay. One day here, 2 days there. That is to keep a touch of the market, but that is not for everybody.
Yes.
So for my fund, I essentially, this is what I say, till things clear out, and I still continue to hold that view. My daughter's money, for example, I've not invested till today. I mean, she, all their friends are investing and all that, but I have not invested because I believe core investments you have to do at the bottom of a cycle or of some cycle. You have to get some hang of the cycle. And today, there are too many uncertainties in the world. I mentioned all of them in economic, geopolitical, technology, climate change, so many. There's too much going on in the world for at least for me to take a view on investing. And there are many things going on in India as well. So therefore, it is better to sort of stay away. If you have to do, like I said earlier, just go into a passive Nifty fund. The Nifty obviously over a period of time will grow. Make systematic investments in the Nifty fund, and don't get into individual stocks and all at the moment. Is my view? Yeah, correct. And diversify. Obviously, those are the two mantras. The two basic mantras which I said earlier. They work. Index funds, passive index funds, and diversification across markets and in your portfolio. That's all. In asset classes. Those things, if you do, you'll be okay.
Great. So we have had some insights for the youth. We had some insights from the financial perspective. Now we are coming to the life perspective. So you have wrote that the life moves forward, but it is understood backwards. So looking at your decision back from 1997 to prioritize your father's health, and how did you reshape your definition of success?
Well, that was a tough one. That was a really tough one. I agree. Sujatha, ultimately, it's all about the choices you make when you come to a fork in your path. Ultimately, it's all about that. You will obviously, as you go on life goes on. And at some point, you'll come to a fork. Now, and the choices you make, that is what you really are at the core. That helps you make those choices. This is not something which anybody can advise you on. It comes from within. You'll have to do that. In my case, I made a certain choice, and it was done actually in a minute. When he was on the hospital bed, it was made in a minute. That no, screw my career. That is not important. This is important. I have to take this, and I'm so grateful to the Almighty that we took that decision. I took my children out of school. We came back here. No school, no house, nothing, no job, all of that. But I got 25 extra years with that, 23 extra years with that. And the diagnosis in Indonesia, which was done, was wrong. In the hospital bed, what they were telling him was wrong. It was wrong. It had gone completely haywire. So the point is, it was a difficult choice to make. But today I'm a very contented man, very contented. So I've always prioritized, and thankfully I have it as of now, is three things: peace, fulfillment, and happiness. These are what I have today, and this is what I prioritize. Though I do acknowledge that I could have made much more money than my peers, at that point in time, if I had sort of chosen the other option. But would I have got all of this, especially for a man with a conscience? I don't think so. So that is that is really where it is. And the positive spin-off of this, hopefully, would be that my two daughters would have imbibed some of the key tenets to a balanced and happy life. because they saw this when they were very young, which is essentially, sense of responsibility, selflessness, and putting others you love in front of your own desires, in terms of priorities. I said these three things, if they ultimately have imbibed or will imbibe as it go along, ultimately, like I said, it's the choices you make. So this is about my choices, yes. Yeah.
At times, values and personal relationships are very important, and you need to put them ahead before anything, I feel. But again, as you mentioned, that is a personal choice.
Yes, it's a
And
personal choice.
so in today's time, we see youngsters, professionals who underestimate the personal choices in shaping their own life and for their
Correct.
satisfaction. Do you
Correct.
think that, how do you think that this has gone to the extent from where, even from my generation or your generation and the Gen Z that we say now? So do you think that they really underestimate the personal choices that they have to make?
See, it depends a lot, I think, on how you are brought up, the environment in which you are brought up. So if I look back in my case, I think all that came to the fore at that moment is what I have seen my parents and my dad also do for their parents, despite a lot of adversities of the pre-independence era and all of that, right? So I think a lot of it comes from them, the ability to distinguish between black and white, because life is all about managing the gray in between, right? It's all about that. Black and white is very simple to understand. It is the gray, navigating the gray area, which is where you need all your intellect, all your perspective, all your judgment, and all of that, right? And that AI will never replace. That AI will never replace. That's why I always say for AI, the leaders, the leadership qualities, if you can build, that will always remain. So similarly, I say here that the background is important, from where you come from, and again, it's a very personal thing, and from what I see around, I mean, of course, this may not be extrapolated across the country, but what I see, the chaos on the roads, the lack of public discipline, the inability to work with others, the inability to stay in an apartment complex, with basics in place about community living. Those things are obvious to us, right? We're seeing it all over. So that tells me that, yeah, I mean, those sort of value systems, etc., moral studies, value systems are not being inculcated in the current generation as we see it. So there is a generational shift there. So good or bad, time will say. Obviously,
Yeah.
I don't think that is a very good thing to do but at the same time, yeah, you're right. I mean, to a very large extent, you're right. So that perspective is not coming about a balanced, holistic way of
Yes.
looking at life and careers in particular. Yeah.
You often speak about positive skepticism and being skeptical positively and challenging the dominant narratives. So
Yes.
how can leaders encourage dissent without weakening the teamwork?
Yeah. Sujatha, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Because, and I'll say why it is tough. I've always followed that path, so I know how tough it is. But it is tough because of the operating environment is crucial to its success. It's crucial to its success. Now, in the age of authoritarianism, which we are seeing all over, polarization and cheerleading, whoever is the dominant narrative, we just keep on cheering it. Where it's more visibility and PR is more sought after than substance. That is more sought after. Who can cheerlead me more is who I need in the team, right?
Yeah.
The qualities of standing up to do the right thing and go against the dominant narrative is tough. It can be done. It has been done, but it is tough, and there's a price to pay for it sometimes.
Yes.
But being a Bengali at the core, and then again from an army background, of the mid 20th century, that pre-independence, immediate post-independence period army, that army. I followed Rabindranath Tagore's eternal lines, Akla Chalo Re. Akla Chalo Re means, it's a very famous thing, famous song. This basically means you do what is right and you move ahead. If someone comes with you, fine. Don't come, that's fine too. But like I said, on the practical side, you need institutional safeguards to make this work. You need institutional safeguards to make this work. And it's up to corporate leaders to inculcate this in their organizations and obviously in countries on a higher scale and all of that. So, for example, Azim Premji, who I worked obviously directly with, Mr. Narayan Vagul, ICICI, the founder of ICICI, ICICI chairman at that time, Narayan Murthy, Anu Agha, Harsh Mariwala, Uday Kotak. These are some leaders who come to mind immediately for having exactly done that and creating their organizations which have outlived many, many decades, right? And will continue to outlive because their organization is there for all of us to see. So, like I said, the institutional safeguards are very important if you're going to speak your mind. But in a social structure, which we are heading towards and which is there in a large extent, which equates, let's say, sycophancy as a metaphor of loyalty, then be prepared to face intense opposition, when you take principled positions. Often from the very people whose interests you are trying to protect, actually. It's very paradoxical, but that's the way it is. Because such actions are perceived to be against the powerful interests.
Yes.
So there's a difference, if you are saying something for the good of the company, it need not necessarily be for the good of the founder or the chairman or the CEO.
Yes.
That distinction is very important to make, which Mr. Premji taught us, and Mr. Narayan Vagul taught us, way back when I was on the board of Viprobiti at a very young age, and I learned a lot there. That is important. But most founders today, or most CEOs today, equate that with their own well-being. Sometimes they are at diversity to each other. What is good for and as a CFO, that's one of the critical roles which one has to play. What is good for the company may not necessarily be good for the founders and vice versa.
Yeah.
So that distinction is something. So, like I said, that institutional framework is necessary to make this work. So what happens, Sujatha, is that in the connotations of teamwork, you hear this term quite often. It's generally used to arrive at a consensus to the dominant narrative. The dominant narrative is floated. A lot of cheerleaders and people are sort of put around, and there's a consensus.
Yeah.
And because you have not debated it from all angles, you often arrive at a suboptimal solution for the company is concerned. That is the problem. That is where the crux is. And this refers to essentially a psychological drive for consensus at any cost, which suppresses dissent and appraisal of alternatives. You do that and then come to a decision is fine. So a very famous case study is John F. Kennedy. President Kennedy actually broke this practice in the United States, in the White House, and created a genuine framework for transparent decision-making, which resulted in the resolution of the nuclear war in 1962, which was called the Cuban Missile Crisis, and without annihilation of the whole world. It's a very big case study. You should study it. I've written about it in some context in all that. So he actually broke that practice. He said, no, it's not my decision which is important. You all go into smaller rooms and come back to me with opposing views, and then I will take a call. That requires courage. And in our society today, I don't see that happening on a large scale. Some leaders I've mentioned, who actually inculcate that, but not many. So that is a problem. That's a serious problem about where we are headed. And ultimately, leaders who surround themselves with people who always agree will soon be surrounded by people who have nothing to say.
Yes.
And they'll be very lonely at the top. And ultimately, you cannot create organizations which last, which are built to last. You cannot create without this aspect. But it's a tough one. But it requires self-courage to do it. I have done it. I paid a price for it at times, yes, but so be it. So be it.
Do you say from all these things, do you think that psychological safety is one of the key aspects to have disagreements with your peers or with your leader?
Yes, of course. You need to be secure yourself first. Unless you're secure in your conviction, a lot of people have told me at various points in time that your courage of conviction is very large. So I may be wrong. I mean, with hindsight, who knows? Nobody knows who's right or wrong, because all that
Yes.
only hindsight will, with hindsight will show. But the courage of conviction is very large, and so that needs to be put on the table. Is always been my view. You listen to that and then you take. So there are certain companies I've worked in where this was actually, adhered to. People really love that. There are certain companies I've worked, organizations I've worked when this was not appreciated. So it's all sorts. I've seen this. So that's what gives you wisdom. That's why many times, right, with the benefit of age, hindsight, and wisdom, there are many things which become clearer. But when you're traversing the path, you need perspective to actually go forward.
True. I think that is it, sir, for us for
Right.
today's session. This has been
Wonderful.
so insightful, and whatever you've spoken, I think it's very impactful as well for me, and for all the viewers who are going to watch this, and for all young leaders who are there making their careers, everything coming out from you, who has so much experience around in this industries and across finance. It's a great opportunity to have you with us. So thank you so much for your time for that.
Thank you very much, Sujatha. Thank you very much indeed. One last summary, I would like to say one-liner, which
Yes.
is on life's perspectives, basically, because everything flows from there, is that, and I've written about this somewhere, is that discovering and making peace with one's ignorance is a fulfilling journey to one's core. We should not show what we are not. Be genuine to yourself. So discovering that, and this will help in breaking out from the room which we have created for ourselves and get trapped in, as we move in life. Once you do that, it's very liberating, and it'll help you take the right decisions. Thank you,
This
Sujatha.
is
Thanks.
also a very good summary that you've made. So
Yes,
thank you so
yes.
much for,
Thank you, Sujatha.
especially in today's world, for that. So thank you so much, sir, for your time.
Absolutely, Sujatha. Pleasure. I mean, it was very, very nice talking to you.